Hello and welcome to the IBM Internet of Things. Introducing the Maximo Oil and Gas or Health, Safety and Environment Manager solution. Today's topic is regulatory compliance and I'm your host, Darren Kwasnicia. The purpose of this video, the VM or data set you're using, and the included data is twofold. One is to provide our technical experts, our sales individuals, our business partners, support people, and our customers with a data set that is the enrichment of max demo data as it relates to process safety in the oil and gas industry. Two, the purpose of this video is to help you understand specific functionality in the solution. For salespeople, it may help with articulating value. For customers, it may help you solve a business problem. In order to keep these videos to a reasonable length of time, we have focused on a couple key product functions and a limited set of use cases. These videos do not replace spending time with the product or getting qualified Maximo training to fully understand all the capabilities of the solution. We sincerely hope these videos are of value to you. As in previous recordings, I'm going to spend a small amount of time talking to you about the enhancement you'll see at the Start Center. The Start Centers instantly give you recognition that the data in the background is different than max demo data. Max demo data, you would have your basic work order inventory Start Centers. Those have all been hidden, they're still there, but have been supplemented with process safety and oil and gas related Start Center data. The first Start Center you see is more of an analytical Start Center, might be a high-end user looking for instantaneous snapshots of information, trying to give them a better reflection of key issues within the organization without having to mine a whole bunch of data in Maximo. In this example, and again, example data only, you might, for example, come over to incidents, notice that a large percentage of the incidents that occur in your organization are of injury type. So that might give you the determination you need to drill in further and understand what type of injuries and why these injuries happen within your organization. Another metric you might look at is incidents by location. So we see the Explorer area within our location hierarchy is obviously the area where most situations occur. I might drive into that location a little bit further, try to determine maybe the incident types at that location. So again, I see a lot of them are safety related, they're injuries, there's a couple damage. So maybe that's why my injury rate is so high, is all based on this one area, and I can kind of further analyze that data. So that's the data you can get from the Start Centers and kind of the stories that you can tell. I encourage you to look at the data that you see in these result sets and come up with your own ways of articulating the value based on the data. The second Start Center you see is kind of a level deeper. It's not so high level, it's not so analytical, it's kind of a hybrid of both. And this might be more of a health and safety individual within an organization, more of a Start Center they'd look at. Because there are a number of applications that they might want to interact with directly in their favorites. So for example, updating the permit to work records or creating some new standard actions that people can choose from, that can all be done through here. I also see information that's a little higher level. It's not at the individual level. It's giving this person the ability to see kind of who is responsible for outstanding corrective actions as they relate to incidents. So an incident occurs, someone's assigned a corrective action to resolve a deficiency that was noted during that incident. So rewriting policies, updating procedures, new machine guarding policies. I can kind of see who has them, what their progress or what their status looks like, maybe dates, that requirement dates, so I can continue to kind of keep on top of that. I can even go deeper and further into the data and say, well, I'm actually Wilson, so only show me Wilson's outstanding actions. So I see Wilson has a priority 3 job where he needs to review his maintenance procedures. He has a priority 1 job where he needs to rewrite hard hat policy due to deficiency that occurred in the organization. So again, it's demo data. It gives you some snapshots of information, but understand that different levels of users are going to have different access to data and see information that's pertinent to what they're trying to accomplish. The other one might be very specific to a role within an organization. So not high-level analytical, not mid-level safety coordinator, but more of a someone that has an impact on safety or the overall organization's specific business process, but this individual is very specific to managing permits. So it might be an operator within a control room. Individuals come up, ask for permits. This individual would assign permits, and then the Start Center would show you, how many permits are open, who has permits, when they're due back. You might close out all permits at the end of the day or end of the week. You've got that visibility. Open permits by permit center. All that information can be viewed here as well. But again, today's topic is not so specific on Start Centers and all the data that's been added to this oil and gas health and safety database. It's very specific on one use case. And this is where you want to learn how the regulatory compliance application works, and again, articulate the value that exists within that single set of functions. So where I'm going to go with Maximo is under the planning section. If I go about halfway down, I see that there's a regulatory compliance application. So I'm going to refresh. I've opened the filing cabinet. I want to see all the regulatory documents that I have stored within Maximo. So one of the things that this application can do is become a repository of regulatory requirements that you have as an organization, regulatory compliance documentation. So these could be regulatory requirements that you've generated as an organization. So maybe through learning, through incidents and investigation, you've put in some of your own policies, regulatory compliance policies. Some of them can be based on where you're operating. So maybe at a local or state level, there are specific requirements. So maybe if you're operating within the state of Oklahoma, they've got a whole bunch of mandated requirements or regulatory compliance requirements that you need to be able to follow. One might be if one of their health inspectors comes on site, you need to give them immediate access. So this would be a place where you'd store those so that you at least have visibility into the requirements that you're supposed to be responsible for. Another example would be more federal level regulatory requirements, and that's where we see a large increase in the number of those. So that would be, for example, here I've got Clean Air Act Part 71. So this would be like our Title V reporting. So there's a requirement for most organizations to report greenhouse gas data. So we want to know that that's a requirement that we're responsible for. We would store that within this database, this Maximo database. Now, it does check off the box as being a place where we can store regulatory requirements, but it's a lot more than that. And I'll kind of build up some examples here and show you a little bit better how it can be more than that. So we've got here a Directive 35. It's around baseline water testing, water well testing. So let's go find out a little bit more about what that regulatory compliance requirement is. So it looks like it's an active requirement that we're responsible for. It's been classified as an environmental requirement. Anytime you see the glass, you can click on that. Here are the different domains when you're associating your regulation. And anytime you see these type of value lists, know that they are configurable. You can edit the values that exist within here. These are the values that we put in with this new data set. There's a regulation number, so a very specific regulation number if we need to look it up online. It's valid from this date, so it looks like it's a fairly new regulation. It has no expiry date, so we're probably going to be responsible for this unless that changes over time. If we were to have an expiry date and it's potentially a renewable regulation, we can put escalations on that to make sure people are notified proactively. The authority is AER, so that's Alberta Energy Regulators. It's actually regional, so it only applies to the province of Alberta, and its regulatory country is in Canada. So this is more of a state or provincial level regulation that this organization needs to be responsible for. It probably doesn't apply in other states or provinces, but when they're operating within this area, they need to be well aware that this is a requirement, and it is really around water well testing. So there's some details on the requirement. If we wanted more specific details, we could go look at the attachments that are in Maximo, and we see that the actual Directive 35 has been attached. So if I want more information, I can scroll through and see exactly what's required. So it's just telling me who you send the test to, what test levels have to be, what we're looking for depth and all that information. So very specific information as it relates to this regulation. Now, all that's good. Again, we're becoming a library of regulatory requirements that potentially could expire, but at least from a due diligence perspective, we have that information captured in Maximo. But Maximo wants to be more than that. It wants to not just hold the data for you, because you're probably doing that somewhere else anyway, and putting in Maximo, you get it in one location, but is it really providing any value? And that's where these next two tabs start providing more value. So logging information, it just tells you any updates that happen to this regulation. So correspondence communication, whether it's via email or whether it's through log entry updates, this tells us that back on the December 8th, there was an update on the regulation. We should probably look at it, see what changes were made. But the Where Used tab is where it really becomes a powerful component. So this regulation, once it's defined, we can actually associate it with assets within our environment. So if there are specific assets that this applies to, when we're working on that asset or have work orders or interacting with that asset, the regulatory information will be visible. The same goes with location. So in this example, because it was Alberta, maybe based on our location hierarchy, we would identify everything from Alberta down, that those locations would be impacted by this regulation. I chose a different path. I actually chose job plans. So when I looked at the Directive 35, there was actually a pretty good detailed description of what was required as part of this. It told me the depth I need to measure, the type of sample I need to take, who I send the sample to. So I've got a good foundation of information that could help me build a job plan to explain to someone how to do this water test. So that is the route I chose, is I decided to go with job plan. You could associate it with a hazard if it's a regulatory compliance document that's related to hazards, and if you associate or create a permit that's related to this regulatory compliance document, that could be associated as well. So again, I decided to choose a job plan. Now I've got a defined procedure that explains exactly how I do this water test. And what I would do in this example, and I have done, is I've taken that a step further and I've now associated that job plan with a PM. So now I put frequency around it. So now every X number of days, I'm going to get Maximo creating an inspection work order for me to go do baseline water testing based on this regulatory compliance document. Now the reason that in this example I just created the job plan and I don't have a PM is because I want the job plan to trigger a different way. I actually wanted it to trigger based on completion. So when that well is complete, that's when that test needs to be done. That will trigger through condition monitoring. The job plan will be created. There'll be a work order for me to do that water test, and then I can move on. I will show you some examples of some different ways of interacting with that though, and using the PM application. So I've got another one here, this AB30. So it is an ANSI ASME B30, Part 14, crane derrick hoist. Looks like an inspection that's been mandated by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. It's a US regulation, and it's valid from 12/1/2010. Safety-related regulation. So this organization has put in a mandate to make sure that I do crane inspections. So it's a regulatory compliance requirement that I have. In order to continue to operate as a company, I need to have proof that I've done these inspections on my cranes at whatever defined frequency this organization has set up for me. And if I ever get audited, I need to be able to present that information. So let's look a little bit more into this one. On the attachment side, I see that the B30 Part 14 has been attached, so it's given me all the detailed descriptions. Again, great information to have from a reference perspective, but it would be really nice if I could articulate the information that's in here into a standard procedure or job plan, so that when my inspectors are doing their work, they've got a consistent, repeatable business process on how to do these crane inspections. So what I've done in Maximo, I go look at the log tab, I see there are no changes, it's a fairly new regulation, it's been fairly consistent. But I go look at the Where Used tab, and the first thing I see is that I did associate it with the asset. So I have 2 overhead cranes that operate within my environment. I've actually made the association. So the nice thing about this is if I have a contractor, an employee, and they're just bringing up history or a record related to asset 1220 or 12500, they would know all regulatory requirements that are applicable to that crane. Again, as mentioned before, I could associate with a location, a hazard, a permit, or a job plan. So this is really what I was driving to in this example. that attached document gave me the definition of what I needed to do on these crane inspections. So what I did is I replicated that data into a job plan that defines exactly what needs to be done, and then I can associate time, material, and description to that particular job plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave regulatory compliance for a brief second here, and I'm actually going to go into the job plan component of Maximo, and I'm just going to search for that job plan. So I've got a regulatory crane, let me scroll up, regulatory crane inspection job plan that's been defined, it's active. It does have a condition for work, and this is a component that we probably haven't talked about before that's very specific to the oil and gas HSE system, but we've set a condition where it has to be in a locked out status to work on it. And then we go to the job plan tasks. We see we need to tag crane and hoist, control devices, brake travel, hook inspection. All that's been defined as steps as part of this inspection. We see that it's been assigned to a second class mechanical, one of them for 3 hours. So all that information has been defined. And the thing that gets interesting here is, number one, in the details section, we've also defined that there is a permit, equipment certification and testing permit that needs to be pulled in order to work on this. A predefined risk assessment has been created so that we know the risks associated with doing these crane inspections. We could go into detail and actually look at what the risk assessment told us. If there are any preparation activities that we need to do before we start the work, and if it was a situation where we're doing test results, so maybe as found L's left, maybe it is tolerances, maybe even on the hoist itself, maybe you're doing measurements. That information can be captured here as well. But the specific thing I want to mention is a regulation. So now this job plan in the job plan library has reference back to the regulation on why it's there. We're doing these steps in this job plan because this regulation defined it. So then the next step, and the way to make this even more powerful, is now going to the preventive maintenance application. So if I go into PMs and application, I go look at all records, and I'm just going to do an advanced search here. And I'm going to search for all PMs that are calling that job plan. So it was the ANSI B30, and I do a find, and it tells me that there are 3 different PMs set up in the system to trigger at some frequency for me to do regulatory inspections on cranes. It looks like the definition of the regulation is all the same, but they're affecting 3 different assets within my environment. So I'll bring up the first one, 1029. So I'm doing a regulatory crane inspection on my overhead crane, 12200. What I'm doing is an ANSI B30 inspection. It is a work type of inspection, so it's not going to show up in my PM or my emergency or my corrective or capital work list. It's inspection type work. And I could even create, if I wanted more definition, I could create a work type of, inspection R, so it's regulatory inspection, and it could totally be in a different bucket of work that I need to do. It's going to put it in a waiting for scheduled status, and the frequency of this is every 180 days with a lead time of 5 days. So 5 days prior to needing to be done, it's going to create a work order of inspection type or regulatory inspection type, and it will put that in the system for me to do. So if I was to go to Maximo, and I'm just going to actually circumvent the system here and tell Maximo, okay, 180 days is due, please go create this work order for me to go do this crane inspection. Maximo will do that. It will run here and generate, and it tells me that it created work order 1293. So again, if I go to Maximo, I go to work orders, and I bring up 1293. So it happens when you type quicker than the system is caught up. So there we go. So there is ANSI B30 crane inspection regulatory. So that looks pretty close to probably being what generated for us. It was on asset 1220. And I go look at the plan tab. It should give the same information that we saw in the job plan. Yep, tag, control, brakes, mechanic, etc., etc. But the one thing that we see, which come over from the job plan, is number one, in the detail section, we see the control of work definition. So we do need that same permit that was defined on the job plan. We do see the pre-assigned risk assessment. So overhead crane inspection work risk assessment comes over. and then reference to the regulation. So now anytime that you get audited, you can go look at the regulation, you can do a look back historically and see, show me all work orders that I've done that apply to that regulation, and you'll be compliant from an audit perspective. So it's a way to take standard information or generic regulatory information and make it actionable within your environment. That said, not every regulatory requirement is that well defined by the authority. So it might be up to your organization to put definition around that and determine whether it is actionable. Sometimes it's email updates, sometimes it's communications. You can make all that actionable within Maximo if applicable. The other thing I'll mention here quickly with regulations is that often regulations are more than just a single task. They're very detailed. They can be multi-page. They can be 120-page PDFs. Again, it's up to you to determine how many of those requirements within that document are actionable and whether you want to define it and make them actionable within Maximo. With that, I'm going to jump back to the Start Center and I'll digress on this conversation as it relates to the regulatory compliance. Hopefully that gives you some focus on the capabilities behind that application and again, maybe the way that you can best either use or articulate the capabilities that exist within regulatory compliance. Thank you for your time and you have a wonderful day.